Marketer of the Day, number 422, the Anticipatory Organization. Turn disruption and change into opportunity and advantage with innovation expert Daniel Burrus. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening. We're talking right now with Dan Burrus, and Dan is considered one of the world's leading technology forecasters and innovation experts, and he's the CEO of Burrus Research, and that's a research and consulting firm that monitors global advances in technology-driven trends to help clients profit from technological, social, and business forces that are converging to create enormous untapped opportunities. And Dan is a strategic advisor to executives, helping them to develop game-changing strategies based on his proven methodologies for capitalizing on technology innovations. And he's the author of 7 books, including the New York Times bestseller Flash Foresight, and his latest book is called The Anticipatory Organization. And Dan has all kinds of amazing things to share with us today. He just told me that he just passed 1 million followers on LinkedIn. Gonna have a lot of fun. How are things, Mr. Dan?
Hey, I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on your show.
Glad to have you. And I think I might have kind of butchered your last name there. I know that we just kind of asked what it was, and then I kind of had a little bit of a brain fart. So one more time, how do we say last name?
Hey, Burrus.
Burrus.
You didn't do bad. Burrus, yes.
All right. So I was close. All right. So anyway, so what do you have going on these days?
Well, first of all, it may sound like this book is only for really big companies, but actually it's not. It's for individuals, entrepreneurs, people that are just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. This is right up your alley because, again, I've started 6 companies over the years. 5 were profitable in the first year. 4 were national leaders in the first year. So I don't just write books. I know how to do this, and I'm sharing all of those techniques in the Anticipatory Organization.
Great. And I'm excited to jump into all of that. And so, I mean, kind of just jumping off here, do you see everyone making like a mistake all across the board? Like every business that you see that's maybe like having trouble getting going or growing, do you see like a huge like number one problem just happens again and again?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think what happens is we all get, number one, we all are really busy, and we get really busy missing the bigger opportunity. So, you can busy yourself today right out of business. So you also have to schedule some time to be strategic. Secondly, we get a lot of barriers in our way, a lot of big problems. Maybe you think, well, I got to raise money or I got to do this or that. But actually, one of the principles in the book is to take your biggest problem and skip it. And it shows how to do that. And when you understand problem skipping, you can succeed faster. And I'll give you one more. I think we all think big about our future, but here's what I would say. Think big about it, but then realize you just thought way too small. There's a bigger big, so never do the big, do the bigger big. And again, I'm trying to show you how to see that bigger big.
Great, and I can definitely relate to that kind of stuff in letting just something silly hold me back or in not thinking big enough. And it reminds me kind of like, like if you're playing baseball and you swing the bat to hit the ball, you swing through the ball. Or when they teach you like karate and stuff like that, they teach you to punch through stuff. Or even like if you're running and you say, I'm going to run until I get to the next street or the next telephone pole. And then you run a little further, or you set your sights further than you have to be, knowing that even if you fall short, then you'll be further than you thought. So if you're like, well, I'm just going to go I'm going to run the next minute. But if you say, well, I'm going to run the next 3 minutes, even if you fall short at like 2.5 minutes, you're like, that's way further than I thought I was going to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea of you think you need a lot of money to start a business or you need investors. And again, that's your assumption. And if that's your assumption and you think that's a fact rather than an assumption, you're going to be looking for money and you may or may not find it, which is, by the way, a barrier keeping you from moving forward faster. So, there's even things that you might think are impossible are doable. I'll give you a quick example. One of the principles in the book is opposites work better. And back around 2001 or 2, when a lot of people were putting out free e-zines, I thought, why not do the opposite? Why not put out a monthly electronic magazine and make it really expensive? So I launched e-zine. I charged $120,000 a year for it, so obviously it was a bit expensive, and it ended up really, really well. But here's why it worked. First of all, you would, if you've never asked yourself, what would have to be in an e-zine that would get someone to pay $120,000 a year for? You see, if you don't ask that question, you're never going to find that answer. But if you ask something big and bold and like that, all of a sudden you start getting answers. And it changed how I marketed. For example, the first one to subscribe to it was a head of marketing at Walmart. Now, probably no one else in Walmart is going to subscribe to it. Hey, I don't care. 120,000 a piece, one per company is good. In other words, it changed how I marketed as well. Now, I'm only bringing up that example to show, wow, you would have thought no one could do that. Yes, you can. And by the way, I didn't need a staff to do that either. I took a lot of those problems and skipped it. So let's not get hung up on that current problem. Matter of fact, here's the insight. Whatever problem you got, it's the wrong one. That's why you're stuck. If you peel the onion back, and there's a technique to do that, I teach in the book, you can get to what the real problem is, which is completely doable and solvable.
Well, great, and I can definitely relate to that, and I think that a lot of my customers and people that struggle with like silly stuff like technology stuff. They say, I need to have a website, or I need to finish this website, or things have to be perfect, and then sometimes I look at the really simple thing that's holding them back, and I think either like, well, that thing that you're putting in your own way, you can just avoid that, or you can hire someone to do it for you. And so yeah, I can definitely see where people they maybe almost invent these problems that are in their way. So do you think that it's like a confidence thing, or that they're not as passionate about their business as they should be? Like, why do people put these barriers in place, and why do they just let like the silliest thing hold them back?
Well, Robert, you said something that a word you said stuck out, and that is confidence. In the book, one of the things that I do is I talk about how to separate hard trends. By the way, these are based on future facts. They will happen. The good news is you can't stop them, but you can see them coming. And if you can see disruptions before they disrupt, it turns it into an opportunity. And that from the other kind of trends, which are soft trends, those are not based on future facts. Those are based on assumptions. Now, here's how it ties into your comment. And that is, when we live in an uncertain world, there's so much uncertainty out there. And you know what? Uncertainty doesn't empower me. Not only that, personal strategy and business strategy based on uncertainty has high risk. On the other hand, business strategy and personal strategy based on certainty gives you the confidence to make bold moves and has low risk. So what I've done in this is a proven methodology that allows you to find certainty in a seemingly uncertain world and gives you the confidence to make bold moves. And as a matter of fact, I'll share with you just a couple of minutes here to tell you how I used my own principles a couple of years back to, with no employees and no investment and no money and not technical knowledge, started a business that in 6 months was generating 1.1 million a month in recurring revenue. So how did I do that? All right, well, I used the principles that I'm teaching here. And that is, first of all, this is in the halfway through 2009. We're in a big recession. And I thought, how can I start a company with no employees and no money and do well? So I looked at the hard trends shaping the future. And one of the hard trends future facts was mobile applications, apps for our smartphones. And there weren't many back in 2009. Most of them were games and toys showing us how to make a phone look like a beer can. When you tipped it sideways, it looked like you were drinking. And that's 99 cents. And I thought, is it a hard trend future fact? There's going to be more and more mobile apps, or is this a fad? And I saw it, hey, you know what? That's a hard trend. That's future fact. And will there be mobile apps for business? Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, there's going to be mobile apps for all kinds of things. So I thought, what are the mobile apps that will happen? Not that might, that will happen. And I generated a list of about 100 of them, including finding your lost dog, because it's got a little collar thing that's giving out a sensor, remote disease monitoring for patients, which of course we now have. And one of the apps I came up with was, we're going to have mobile real estate apps. So you can actually see homes and where they are using a map on your smartphone. And I came up with that one, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to create the first national mobile real estate apps, which I did, by the way. But I'm not a programmer. So what did I do? I skipped that problem. I called the local university. I said, give me the computing division. I talked to the head of that part of the university, and I said, give me the name of an undergraduate that is smarter than all of his teachers, getting a degree in software programming. And he said, oh, you mean Steve? And I said, yeah, Steve. So I called Steve and I said, Steve, what are you doing on the side while you're going to college? And he said, I'm programming websites. And I said, I bet you're bored. And he said, yeah, I've been doing it since junior high. I said, how'd you like to develop a mobile app that no one has ever seen before that will be amazing? And he said, oh, yeah, I'd love that. And I said, well, I can't pay any money, but I'll give you 5% of the profits for the first 2 years as long as you don't drop out of school, no matter how much money you make. And he said, hey, I'm in. So now I had free labor. It took 6 months to create 3 apps because really it was the same software. I called it Complete Foreclosures, Complete Homes, and Complete Rentals. But instead of charging 99 cents for the app, which means then you got to support it for free forever, I made the apps free because I could make more money by making them free. By the way, that's an opposite. And I ended up with the 17th most downloaded app in the first week in the Apple Store and had millions of users within a couple of months. How did I make money? I came up with the first recurring revenue in apps. What I did is I charged real estate agents $24.95 a month for an exclusive zip code. Didn't take long, and all the zip codes are gone. That's $1.1 million a month in recurring revenue. I then sold that software, licensed it to a company that you probably use now. It's Zillow. So the point is, I didn't have employees. I didn't know how to program. I didn't want to spend a lot of money, and there's a solid example of using the principles in my book, The Anticipatory Organization, of how you can do something like that. So look, here's the message to people out there. Take your problems and skip them. Use the hard trends that are shaping the future to gain the confidence to make a bold move. And there's actually I got 25 principles like that in the book that can help you out.
Great, and that's an amazing story, and it sounds like once you begin to combine some of these principles together, you can tap into some really powerful stuff with like the doing the opposite and skip your problems and stuff like that. And so that's a really great story there, especially because like as the story was beginning to unfold, I was kind of thinking like, well, he's going to make it out. Like how much of a time commitment that can be? How many years is he going to get stuck on that? But then that's great because you just partner with someone who did the work for you. So that way you didn't have to put a lot of you didn't have to like make it like your kind of full-time job there. And so when
Robert, let me just jump in because you're making a good point here. See, we all think we don't have the time. While I was doing that, and that whole thing took 6 months, while I was doing that, I was writing a book. I gave over 50 speeches around the world, and I was doing consulting for companies like Deloitte and some others. So, hey, I was doing plenty. The point is, we don't think we got enough time. Nonsense.
And if the excuse is I don't have enough time, then there must be a way to skip that problem as well, right?
Absolutely.
Well, cool. And so when you were figuring out the idea for this, how did you avoid the problem of getting your head stuck in the clouds? Like when you were looking at the future hard trends and listing out ideas for apps, how did you prevent that from just being like a constant project where like, every day you just kind of come up with more and more ideas and never get anywhere? How did you remain focused enough to actually get somewhere?
Well, it basically took about one afternoon to come up with 100 apps. That one of the principles I teach, Robert, is that if it can be done, it will be done. If you don't do it, someone else will. So I was asking myself, what are the apps that don't exist today that I know will happen for sure? And when you use that kind of confidence, and again, there's a little more to the hard trend area that we can talk about in a few minutes to even make this more solid, you can end up seeing the future. In other words, I asked myself, will there be apps for customer support in the future? Will there be mobile apps for customer service? Will there be apps for purchasing in companies, for logistics? And of course, I was coming up with the answer, well, yeah, of course there will be. And if I don't make them, someone else will. It wasn't that hard to come up with that many apps. So how do you see it? And basically, there are 3 categories of hard trends. And if it's okay, why don't I just share those 3 and give you an example of how you could very quickly make a lot of money with each one of those? Would that be a okay thing to do?
Sounds perfect. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it, because again, I'm here to try to teach and stimulate. So one of the categories, because this isn't that hard, one of the categories is demographics of the three. So example, in the United States, there's 78 million baby boomers. Hard trend, future fact, they're going to get older. They're not going to get younger, they're going to get older. So there's opportunities that you can see and have the certainty around it. So let's talk about one that doesn't exist today that any one of the listeners could do. And that is, well, as people get older, a lot of them love to go boating. But if they as they get older, it gets kind of hard to launch the boat. It gets kind of hard to even get in the boat. Maybe you've got a mom or dad or a grandpa or grandma that are like that now. Why don't you and I create the easy launch trailer for seniors? If we did something like that, would we have a fully predictable growing market every year? Well, yeah. Would we know which countries to export to and which countries to avoid? Well, of course, Istanbul, average age is 28. Japan, very aging. They got a lot of water. Well, that's a perfect one. You see what I mean? You've got opportunity. Let me give you one more on demographics, just to show you how this works. How about a smartwatch, or a smartwatch app even, but let's make it for seniors, 80 years old and older. They're not using smartwatches now. Good. I love untapped markets. And you might say, well, they're not going to buy one. They're old. They don't care about that. They're not going to buy it. Who's going to buy it? You're going to buy it for them. And why would you buy it for them? Well, all of the smartwatches, like all the smartphones, have a little chip in it that lets you know about motion. And, north, south, east, west, when you move your phone sideways and so on. Well, if 90-year-old grandma's watch rapidly moves 4.5 feet, what happened to grandma? Well, she probably fell. Does grandma need to know that? No, she's on the floor. Who needs to know it? You do if it's your grandma. And let's say grandpa takes a bunch of walks and loves to go out, but he's getting a little dementia and forgets how to get home. How does he get home? He just asks his watch, how do I get home? And it tells him, take a block to the right and take a right. Now, I could give you more things that watch could do, but you're starting to see, wow, those are two amazing things that, by the way, those are going to happen. Why? Because if I don't make them, and Robert, if you don't make them, someone else will, because the market is there, the need is there, and the tools already exist. Let me give you another category very quickly, and that is, this will shock a lot of listeners, government regulation. You see, when a law goes in, a new regulation comes up, most of us either ignore it or we read about it and we get all upset. But again, here's where opposites plays in. Do the opposite. Let me tell you about a 28-year-old teacher that did really well with no investments and started a big company. And that is January of this year, California passed a little over 1,000 laws just in that state. One of those laws said in 3 years, every kindergartner and first grader, half of their reading material in school has to be nonfiction. By the way, right now it's all fiction. The little engine that could is fiction. Half of it has to be, you got 3 years to do it. So most of us hearing that would say, well, that's stupid. Oh, man, what? Don't they have something more important to do? And we get all upset. But a 20-year-old teacher in San Diego did the opposite. She made 3 phone calls. She called the San Diego School District, the San Francisco School District, and the LA School District, very large ones. And she said, hey, you got 3 years to get half of your books to be nonfiction for those little kids. If I supplied the books, would you be interested? And they said, well, yeah, we didn't know how we were going to do it. To make a long story short, they underwrote her business and became a guaranteed customer, and she didn't have to go on Shark Tank. Why? Because she was being anticipatory rather than reactionary. A third one, because now you're starting to get the idea of how this works. Yeah. A third one very quickly is technology. And you might think technology is, surely you can't predict the future of that. But absolutely you can. Matter of fact, if some of you have read my other best-selling books, look at my 1993 book, Techno Trends. There's even a section in there that says Blockbuster is busted, and if you read the paragraphs under it, you'll see a description of Netflix and when Netflix would happen. And you'll see in their smartphones with accurate time frames and everything else. Well, I'm not the only guy that can predict the future. I'm teaching you in this book how you can do it. And let's face it, if you can predict the future and be right, you've got an advantage.
That's amazing, and that's so many good stories kind of put in there with the demographics. What's great about that is there's a lot of I can hear the excitement in your voice and a lot of focus on like the different uses for this product as opposed to just the product itself. Like, you know, the boat launching app. Here's who's going to use it. The smartwatch for seniors. Here's all the ways that it's going to be helpful, as opposed to, I think some people are kind of short-sighted and would say, oh, well, here's this watch. It connects on Wi-Fi. It does Bluetooth. Well, who cares? But when I connect it to that specific type of person, now there's all these interesting ways of using it. And like the government regulation thing, what I got from that, well, as you explained, that was that as a business owner, we kind of forget sometimes that our job is to solve problems and to kind of fill that gap. So if someone out there, if a bunch of businesses out there have just this requirement coming up that they have no choice but to do, and maybe they have a deadline, and I mean, you can't fight City Hall and all that kind of stuff. So if they have that looming deadline of some kind of change that they have to make, why not contact them and make that change easier? And then as far as the technology stuff, I mean, you're making all kinds of light bulbs go off, because I remember maybe when Netflix only shipped out DVDs, and I had a conversation with a friend once thinking like, you know, it'd be great if Netflix had a way where you can just download the movies that you were going to play and just play them on a computer or play them on a TV screen. And even before the iPhone and smartphones came out, I saw a discussion once on some message boards of people just saying like, well, wouldn't it be great if you could have like a little small computer, and it was like a hard drive, and it would you could like go on Wi-Fi and you could share files, and it was almost to the point of like with the brainstorming process, almost to the point of what like an iPhone and a smartphone was, but then the technology hadn't quite caught up yet, like, you know, cell phone coverage and battery life and all that kind of thing. But the idea was there. And what's great about that is that you can get the things in motion, and then once the rest of the technology catches up to you, you're already in there. And so this is all great stuff. 3 categories of
Robert,
cartridge.
Let me mention something very quick based on what you just said.
Perfect.
And that's in the book. I give you what I call the 3 digital accelerators. These give you the when something will happen. Exactly. I've been doing this for over 34 years. And, you know, like, when is 3G, 4G, 5G, how powerful it will be? So what I'm getting at is when you're having a brainstorming session like you just described with your friends, but you don't know when it'll happen, you're just going to have to wait. Waiting means you're going to react, and someone else will do it before you. But with the book, what I'm doing is teaching you how you'll know exactly when it will happen, so you can be there at the time of need. And, you know, I'm so excited about what this book can do. I've done something for you and for all of your listeners. You can go to Amazon and buy it, but you know what I've done for your listeners is if you go to theaobook.com, I'm going to give you a hardcover copy. I'm charging you a very small amount for shipping because I'm having FedEx ship it directly to you. But it's a small amount. I'm actually losing money on every book. But the reason I'm doing it is I think all of your listeners are going to like this book so much. They're going to tell a friend. They're going to end up buying it, and I'll end up doing fine. So I'm giving it to you.
All right, perfect. Very generous. So everyone make sure that you go to theaobook.com. If you feel like you need to do more in your business, which you do, and you need to up your game and have a proven plan, and if all of these this advice and strategy sounds good to you, and as we're kind of winding down here, Mr. Dan, one thing that I'm curious is, do you have a secret to your marketing? Because, you know, you mentioned that real estate app, and having a good idea and creating a product is one thing, but then actually getting people to use it is another thing. And same deal with that $120,000 newsletter. So when you make a product or a solution or something, and then you say, all right, now I need to get people to go out there and use it. What's your mindset on that? And like, what kind of actions do you take to get some people looking at your stuff?
Another great question. And again, I use a lot of the principles that I'm sharing in the book, and one of them is skip it. So someone, when I was launching the real estate apps, someone said, well, there's already 100,000 apps in the store. Now, of course, that's a small number today, but that seemed big back then. How are you going to be found? How are you going to advertise that? And I said, well, I'm going to skip paying for ads. I make everything I do newsworthy, because if you can frame it so that you get in the news, actually, that makes it more legitimate. It's not an advertisement, and it's free. So what I did, like with the real estate apps, is I said every time a foreclosed home comes into a community, the prices of all the homes goes down, and you end up with more foreclosures. Remember, I launched this in 2009. So I said, so what I'm going to do is I've created this app. I've made it free so that people can find these foreclosed homes, they can buy them, and we can flush them out of the system and turn this economy around. Well, within the week, that was in USA Today, it was in Wall Street Journal, it was in New York Times. By the next week, I was on Fox Television talking about it, and I didn't pay for any of that, and that's how I did it. With the $120,000 newsletter, similar things. What you do is take what you've got and write it into a news story. Make it newsworthy, and all of a sudden, whoa, you are doing fantastic. And I think the reason I have a lot of followers on Twitter and a million on LinkedIn and so on is because I'm empowering people with my messages. So again, you can go to Daniel Burrus on Twitter, any of those, you can find me. And I'm just by giving a lot of really good information, just like you do in this podcast. I mean, the reason you've got a lot of people listening is because you create a lot of value, not just in having someone like me on, but also because you're a smart guy sharing really good stuff in here. And you know what? That ends up growing your tribe as well, because you're helping people, you're serving others. And with that, by the way, I want to thank you for having me on, because you're allowing me to get this important message of not just reacting to change after the fact, not just being agile, which is still reacting, but rather being anticipatory so that you can jump ahead with low risk and the certainty to make bold moves.
I love it. This concept of the anticipatory organization, that part of it of thinking ahead and, getting ahead of things and having that abundance mindset and giving and all that. This is making a lot more sense. And I think it's going to help a lot of people who are maybe making things too hard for themselves. And maybe they need to take a step back and be more strategic and think more about the people that they're helping, the people that are going to be on their team, and as opposed to just being in that worker employee mode, trying to grind it out. If you grind it out, you try to do it all yourself, you just try to push through with willpower. Next thing you know, you spend a lot of time on something that didn't really get very far, and then all these other competitors came and kind of stole your thunder. So if I think a lot of people out there who need to be working smarter instead of harder really need to grab this book. And once again, the web address for that is theaobook.com. You go there, you fill out the form, and you'll get that hardcover copy of the book sent to you, and all you have to do is pay for shipping. So why wouldn't you grab that, especially if maybe you out there need a new perspective, a new guide, a new mentor, so to speak. And I'm sure that everyone listening got at least one or two takeaways. So if you got one or two takeaways just from our conversation here, imagine how much of a great plan you'll get by going through this book and then figuring out, okay, instead of just doing things randomly, instead of just doing things day to day, expecting things to happen to me, now I'll take the control back, and now I can figure out a strategy to get to where I want to go and skip the problems that I need to skip, get that confidence back. And so as we're kind of wrapping things up here, Mr. Dan, you said that you've been doing this for years and years. If you could kind of send a message back in time and tell your younger self a really great piece of advice, does anything come to mind?
Well, that's a great question, and I do have something that comes to mind, and that is think big about your future and then realize you just thought small. The reason, you know what, there's a bigger big. Never do your big thing, always come up with your big idea and then render it obsolete by coming up with something that's even bigger. And actually, the bigger big is the thing you're going to want to do. And one last little element to that relates to it, and that is, instead of trying to be successful, which is inwardly focused and measured by you, don't create a life of success. Why don't you create a life of significance? Because when you're focusing on being significant, you're focusing on others. And when you help others, you'll find yourself doing really well.
Great stuff. Great advice, especially for anyone who needs that extra push to reach farther, do more, set bigger goals. I love it. The website to go is theaobook.com and then danburrus.com. I want to thank you so much, Dan, for stopping by and sharing these amazing stories and giving us some really powerful stuff, but at the same time, making it super duper simple so anyone can use it. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you, and thanks for coming by.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Want to listen to more fantastic marketers of the day? Subscribe to us at marketeroftheday.com/iTunes and browse